Hi, I'm Michael Coyote Peach, and this is my poem, One Time in 10. In days gone by, a man's wealth was tied to the size of his herd of cattle. But a longhorn steer could be hard to get near, could put up one heck of a battle. So some folks found it easier to engage in dangerous behaviors. Such unscrupulous types kept a running iron for changing the brands of their neighbors. But most good folks didn't have what it took to live with a guilty conscience, because trust was sacred, and a special brand of hatred was reserved for those involved in such nonsense. And the punishment inflicted if caught and convicted was something to be feared. So most enterprising chaps kept their eyes out for calves that were weaned, but still long-eared. Now, a long-eared calf was a yearling that no longer ran with its mother, and it could be yours if you gave it your brand before it bore any other. A long-eared calf out on the open range was one any cowboy could own, but if you found it near land that a known outfit ran, it was best just to leave it alone. Most ranchers protected their cattle, and they could put a 6-gun to good use, and anyone suspected of rustling might end up on the end of a noose. Still, the practice of claiming these dogies allowed a cowboy to start his own herd. So it was permitted, even admitted, if a man was as good as his word. But any yearling's mother must reside on someone's ranch, so even under the best of circumstances, a cowboy'd be taking a chance. Interpretation was bound to be subjective when claiming a calf was a stray, so each cowboy had to decide for himself just how fast and loose he might play. Now, Doc M.O. Dumas and his friend Joe Lay were well-respected men, and they were known to do the right thing, at least 9 times out of 10. They always pulled their own weight, and they stood on their own 2 feet, and they never shied away from the work that it took to make ends meet. Now, one day, these 2 companions were riding across the valley when Dumas allowed as he would rest his horse, but Joe didn't want to dally. So they said adios and hasta la vista, and Joe went on his way, while Dumas stretched out there in the grass just to watch the ravens play. Now, after a while, when his horse was refreshed, he climbed back in the saddle, and he hadn't ridden long when he heard the distant sound of cattle. And then over a nearby ridgetop came a sight that made him laugh, as down that ravine came a healthy, gambling, frisky, long-eared calf. Now, Dumas, he was the practical kind, aware of economy and thrift, and he was grateful for the opportunity to receive such a timely gift. So, making sure that no one else was in that calf's vicinity, he prepared for horse and rope and calf to unite in a buckaroo trinity. But as he closed the distance, lasso circling overhead, a movement on the other side of the draw filled him with sudden dread. He'd been so intent on that little calf that he hadn't realized there was another horseman bearing down upon his prize. And feeling certain that that calf's mother must be a member of this other man's herd, Dumas broke off his illicit pursuit, and he fled without a word. Now, the route that he took homeward gave that area a wide berth, because the price he'd almost had to pay for that calf was more than it would have been worth. And as he rode, he reflected on the wisdom this experience had taught. If mistaken for a rustler, he could easily have been shot. Now, another couple days went by before Dumas saw Joe Lay and relayed to him the details of what happened on that day. And as he heard the story, Joe began to grin, and he asked his friend to repeat the part about how scared he'd been. In the face of Joe's amusement, Dumas's anger began to rise. At the very least, he'd expected that his friend would sympathize. It's a darn good thing I wasn't shot, since this is how you behave. Well, you'd probably stand there laughing while they put me in my grave. Just to think of all the time gone by we've called each other friends. Well, if that's all my life means to you, this is where that friendship ends. I understand, said Joe. I know exactly how you feel. But your life was never in danger, even though it was a busted deal. And he could no longer contain his mirth, and he began to laugh. You see, that was me you saw that day. We spooked each other from that same little calf. Fear and guilt can trick one's sight and play on one's credulity. And a measure of risk goes hand in hand with any sudden opportunity. So when it comes to your friends, my lads, Don't be too quick to judge them. And if they laugh at your mistakes, that's nothing to begrudge them. Those with whom you're closest and in whom your trust is put will likely do the same as you when the shoe's on the other foot. And anytime you're tempted to light out on a spree, best remember there's a price to pay, and lunch is never free. So don't be seduced by pie in the sky. Keep your focus on the here and now. And even if you can steal the milk, it's safer just to buy the cow.